Newsmaker Hotline. Senator, thanks very much for joining us. And I know that you've got experience in, hostage negotiations, these kinds of things. What are your thoughts on whether or not we're going to be able to, one, find these hostages, these American hostages that Hamas has taken, and that we'll be able to find some way to return them to America?
Well, if I had to ever look for a competent force to do it, it would be the Israeli military. I'm very proud of our own DOD, our own military, but the Israeli military is extraordinarily competent. So if anybody can do it, they will. It's going to be a brutal process. I think, Dan, they're going to be going door to door in Gaza. As you know, Hamas uses civilians as human shields. And look, the Biden administration put a price on the head of every American when they gave the $6 billion to Iran. $6 billion in a one-to-one exchange. So they gave one American for one Iranian, and they topped it off with $1.2 billion per person. $6.6 billion for 5 people, $1.2 billion a person. They put a price on every American's head. And so I think we're going to have, they created a huge incentive for Hamas to do this, very misguided, and I think they've made it very challenging for us. But I have very much confidence in the Israeli military forces, and I'm certain that our intelligence agencies will be working together to try to help make this happen.
Let me ask you, Senator Bill Hagerty joining us. I know that you and many others on the Republican side have been calling for freezing of that $6.5 billion. Woke up this morning, and I'm seeing headlines that show that there may have been a, quote, quiet understanding between America and Qatar to refreeze that $6.5 billion, even though part of the news cycle yesterday was there was no mechanism to refreeze that money. What's the latest, with the understanding that we all know, looking the other way on the oil sanctions and all that, but specifically the $6.5 billion, do you know if that money has been frozen?
On the 6th, the White House is, I think, working desperately to do it because they've now got Democrat support to do this. They had passed my Iran Sanctions Review Act in the previous Congress. We would have had an opportunity to vote up or down in Congress on this. They didn't do it. The Biden administration did this unilaterally. We would have never passed it out of Congress. Now they're getting a lot of pushback from Democrats. So they're trying to find a way, again, not an official way, but to, quote, freeze things for now, to slow things down until the news cycle can sort of float by. What we need to do is bring it back, pass my act. I'm going to bring it back to the floor again and stop this. Let us vote it down. Let us block this. But again, Dan, I've talked about this. This is only the tip of the iceberg. This is the final payment, I hope, that gets made. But the initial problem here starts with the Biden administration's origination. When I served in the Trump administration, my job was to get the Japanese government to stop buying Iranian crude. I was the U.S. ambassador to Japan. We did this all over the world. We brought Iran's funds to a trickle. As a result, Hamas and Hezbollah were going broke. It was widely covered in the news media. Biden comes in, starts looking the other way on sanctions. Sanctions enforcement didn't happen, just the way border enforcement isn't happening with Joe Biden. As a result, they've estimated up to $80 billion of illicit oil revenues have now flowed into Iran. You recall earlier this year that the Biden administration, without congressional approval, approved Iraq to send $10 billion into Iran. This 6 is the final straw, again, associated with a hostage payment. We've got to stop this, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. Iran has become enriched. That's why we have Hamas in a position to do what they're doing, because Iran is funding it. It's their technology. It's their know-how. For the Biden administration to not acknowledge this is shocking to me.
I've got to ask, Senator, also in the news, word is the weapons left in Afghanistan have now made their way to the Middle East. That was actually a story that you and I spoke about back in March. And now it is once again in the news here in the last week that some of the weaponry that Hamas has been using is our weaponry that was left there in Afghanistan after our disastrous pullout. Let me ask you, how difficult is it going to be to now, is there a way to force the Biden administration to start really focusing on, enforcing those sanctions? I mean, they have to be shamed into doing it?
I think that's the only way. Again, they won't enforce the law at our own border. They've allowed, a complete invasion of our southern border. If they don't care about our own country, I'm certain that other countries aren't afraid of us. And we're not enforcing the sanctions. They're so desperate to do a deal with Iran that they're willing to allow Iran to enrich itself to fund an operation like this. And as you said, that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, Dan, I remember our conversation well. That was the greatest embarrassment that our nation has seen in our lifetimes. And it was an $80 billion arms bazaar that they created over there in Afghanistan. It's no surprise that these weapons have wound up in the hands of Hamas, Hezbollah, and others. So now you've got terrorist organizations like Hamas using American weapons to kill Israeli children. It's just sick. It's sad. It did not need to happen. And Joe Biden was so intent on getting the press release that he wanted that he went ahead against the advice of his own Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. He went ahead, did it anyway, and caused the collapse of Afghanistan and this flow of billions of dollars of weapons into the wrong hands.
I know that, I watched the TV and I see that, Antony Blinken is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. And I realize that there's a very open line of support here. But I guess the question that I would have is, do you think that behind the scenes, as Netanyahu and Blinken are talking, do you think that Netanyahu is asking Blinken, why are you allowing Iran to get all of this, billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in lifted sanctions and the $6.5 billion for the hostages? In private, are the Israelis asking the Biden administration, what are you doing?
Dan, I can assure you that what you suggested is correct, because I've talked with Bibi Netanyahu, and that's exactly what he asked me. He's completely frustrated. Under President Trump, you had a White House that was welcome and opening to the Israelis. President Trump invited Bibi Netanyahu over for a state visit. He brought us closer. He moved our embassy to Jerusalem. He initiated and put in place the Abraham Accords that began to bring economic peace and prosperity to the entire region. That was all done with Israel and with Bibi Netanyahu. Joe Biden comes in, won't invite Netanyahu to the White House, won't talk with him, won't meet with him, gives him the cold shoulder, puts distance between America and Israel. That sends another very bad signal to terrorists like Hamas, that America won't be there, that Israel's strongest ally will not be there for them. So I can imagine that the conversations in private between Bibi Netanyahu and our Secretary of State Antony Blinken must be very harsh right now. Bibi doesn't hold back. I'd like to hear those conversations.
Hannah, the Hamas leaders calling for a day of jihad today across the world, and certainly here in America. And, a lot of these experts are saying, well, yeah, this has happened before. Nothing ever really happens. It's my contention that these things happen when we're not looking, when we're not expecting it. That's number one. But number two, and even more alarming to me, of course, is that we're seeing all across the country this support for Hamas, this support for Palestine, and this support for terrorism on college campuses in the streets of New York and Washington, D.C., and some of these other cities. And are you alarmed and or surprised at the amount of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment that does seem to be out there today?
Dan, I'm deeply disappointed and disturbed at what we're seeing. And you've got, as you mentioned, it's happening on college campuses. It's happening in cities. I mean, the march that took place in New York, the demonstration that they had, the pro-Palestine demonstration with swastikas, the annihilation of Israel. Basically, I saw a funny headline the other day in the Babylon Bee, that's a satirical publication, but it talked about, college student leaving microaggression class to go to the kill the Jewish baby march on his campus. I mean, this type of thing, again, that was just a parody, but I think it captures the craziness that's going on with the American left right now. And you've got organizations that many American corporations, contributed to, people blindly, swore an oath to BLM, a Marxist organization that has now changed their logo to have a silhouette of the paragliders that came in from Hamas and slaughtered those 230 Israelis at the music concert. That's now their slogan with us. We stand with Palestine. It is just amazing to me that the rise of anti-Israeli sentiment, the rise of anti-Semitic sentiment among the far left is very frightening. I don't believe that is the case among the mainstream of the Democrat Party, but they've been pulled so hard, so far left, that you've seen very few in Congress that are willing to step up and say what I think they believe. You've seen a White House that took 2.5 days to even come out and say that they supported Israel's right to defend itself. This administration, the Biden administration, created something called the Palestinian Affairs Office, which shouldn't exist. The first message from our State Department was through that office suggesting that Israel not retaliate for the murders that happened. Over 1,000 killed, no retaliation. Then our Secretary of State tweets out that he's been working with the Turkish administration to try to call about a ceasefire before the Israelis have even had a chance to organize themselves and come back and address Hamas. Finally, the White House is saying the right thing. We do stand behind Israel's right to defend itself. Israel is completely capable of doing that, but we've got to give them the moral authority, the headroom, and the support. When I say support, moral support. Now, we've funded Israel significantly. I put in place legislation to replenish the Iron Dome. This is their protection mechanism, but I'm taking the money that goes into Gaza and repurposing that money to help defend Israel. Gaza is where this violence erupted. Let's take that money, repurpose it to help the Israelis defend themselves right now. That's the type of posture we should be adopting, and we should fight back against this anti-Semitism at every turn. We should call it out.
And one of the things, and I asked Senator Marsha Blackburn and Congressman Mark Green and others that this week, what does, we support Israel, what does that mean to you? Does that mean, more funding? How much help do they need? I know that we are all, as conservatives, I think that we're a little weary of, getting involved in, another Ukraine. But at the same time, here we are as staunch supporters of Israel. I don't believe that you can compare the situation with Ukraine and the situation with Israel. But, and I'll get into that later on in the program, but what does I support Israel or we support Israel? What does that mean to you? Does that mean more funding? What does it mean?
What it means to me, Dan, is look, the Israeli military is as competent as they come.
Yep.
They just need the headroom to deal with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. What they're going to do is Hamas is going to use humans as a shield. If the Israelis have called for all of the Gaza civilians to leave, guess what the Hamas Authority is saying? Don't leave, stay.
Yep.
They put their hideouts, they call them their headquarters, in schools, in hospitals, in mosques. They're going to try to use the carnage that will occur as the Israeli ground troops move in to get their hostages, to find their people, find our people, in fact, that are involved in this. They're going to use that footage again to feed their propaganda machine, and Iran is going to be behind this, funding it. We need to step back, allow Israel to do this, not fall victim to the propaganda machine, and continue to support them, give them the moral support that I think should come from the United States of America. We already have given significant economic support to Israel. We're in the process of evaluating that right now. Again, I'm looking at repurposing funds that go in there. Again, funds that are going to Gaza that, as you know, funds are very fungible. If Hamas is in control, they could do something else with those funds that could be very bad. So I'm going to repurpose those funds to help Israel replenish its Iron Dome defense. That's the type of approach, not the Ukrainian, black hole, no strategy, we're just going to be in there as long as it takes, that Joe Biden talks about. They have no strategy with Ukraine, and they haven't articulated one yet. Our strategy here needs to be step back and support Israel and make the world know that we support Israel for once, rather than having these half-hearted statements coming out of our State Department.